Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with Conspicuous. I am joined by the lovely Josh Giles today, who is a friendly face, so it's nice to have another person that I already know to chat to. And he is the Power Platform Solution Architect at Bridgeall. Now, Josh, I know you are a familiar face, you're very involved in the community, which is great. But for those of you that might not know you, let's do a brief introduction to you, where you've come from, and how you are where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, as you already said, my name's Josh Giles. I work at a company called Bridgeall at the minute in Glasgow, Scotland. I'm Scotland based. I don't live in Glasgow. I live just outside of Glasgow, about half hour out. And I'm not Scottish either. I come from south of England originally. I'm Southampton, born and bred, moved up to Scotland about 10 years ago. So, I'm now an adopted Scot, and it's been great. So, really glad to be here today and discuss all of these things with you.
Absolutely. Well, no, I appreciate it. And a bit of appreciation for your, I was about to say your background, but like your room in general. Love the Lego. I know if Keith Atherton's watching, keep your Lego away from him. All right. Still some.
Yeah. It's always a good discussion point, yeah.
It is. So where did your career start, Josh? Have you always been within tech, or when did you enter into the space of Power Platform? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I guess everyone's got a quite unique story how they kind of wound up in the Power Platform, and I guess mine's probably no exception there, in that I've kind of done bits and pieces up until kind of where I am now. So I first kind of started out fresh from college. I didn't go to university or anything, so I left college. I took up a role at a company called Novatech, which anyone that's based in kind of Portsmouth area will know very well. It's a very large kind of IT supply company, built computers, that type of thing. I was doing initially like the returns of faulty computers or graphics cards, that type of thing. And eventually worked my way up right away through to kind of like the call center kind of technical support kind of aspect of the business. So that gave me a really good grounding initially in terms of, customer service, how to speak to people, that type of thing, which is really good. It also gave me a really good kind of technical knowledge on hardware and software, I guess. Obviously back then we were talking in the days of Windows XP still, but it was still a good kind of wealth of knowledge that I gained there. So from there, I kind of took a bit of a complete kind of sidestep, really. I left Novatech and ended up going self-employed for a bit and working as a ceiling fixer and dry liner. So my dad's in that industry, so I went and did that for a good kind of year and a half, just to try it out. I was still young, thought, give it a go. I actually really enjoyed it. I think throughout all of the things that I've done throughout my career, actually just seeing things be built or solutions get kind of worked on is something that I find really kind of satisfying. So yeah, I did that for a bit. Built ceilings, built walls all over the country. Really good experience. And then my life took a bit of a turn when I just decided to move up to Scotland one day, just on a whim. And so I ended up kind of falling back into IT. Ended up at a managed service provider, doing again just kind of tech support, really. And I worked at a couple of managed service providers, and it wasn't until one of them I kind of ended up taking on some SharePoint work, some SharePoint support. That really then started my kind of journey into the business application space, I guess. So worked on SharePoint for ages, became pretty addicted to it, I guess, at the time. I thought it was great. The kind of release of the modern SharePoint online intranet stuff was coming about. It was a really exciting time to get into it. So did that for a good while. And then obviously Power Platform came along in, I think it was 2017, I think. Start to dip my toes in there, and primarily like Canvas apps and some Power Automate stuff, as most people, I think, who get into Power Platform do. So did that for a bit, and then eventually worked my way through some more partners until I've got to where I am now, doing pretty much pure Power Platform, and now as well Dynamics. So not really on the SharePoint side anymore. Kind of left that gig behind a good while ago. But yeah, being able to work on Power Platform dynamic solutions day in, day out is pretty rewarding. Again, being able to see come up with a solution and bring that through to completion is really good and really satisfying.
Absolutely. Well, what a journey. I just love hearing how people got to where they are. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Now, I know that the main theme of our podcast today is going to be talking about communication, which I'm quite excited to talk about because it seems as though it would be such a generic topic to talk about, but no one really talks about it. So we'll dig into that in a little bit. But as I mentioned in your introduction, you are, don't know what just happened with the lighting there, sorry. But as I discussed earlier in the intro, you are very involved in the community and events. Now, I thought I would touch upon that just so people are aware of what it is you bring to the community, because you do bring a lot. So obviously your involvement, what is that at the moment? Because I know you spin a lot of plates.
Yeah, so obviously, as well as the day job, an organizer of the Scottish Power Platform user group, coming up to a year now doing that. And yeah, what a year it's been doing that. It's been such a rewarding experience. I get to speak to so many people and meet so many faces. It's been an absolute blast and probably one of the most rewarding kind of parts of kind of being where I am now in my career, has been able to kind of give back to the community in some way or another. So yeah, we're currently trying to aim for one event a month in person where possible. So if anyone listening is interested in Power Platform or anything to do or related to Power Platform, then check the Scottish Power Platform user group out. I'm sure there'll be an event coming up that you can attend, and would welcome you with welcoming arms. So yeah, I've got that as well. I do run some kind of blogs and stuff, although admittedly I've been a little bit slower on that kind of coming into 2025, just due to kind of personal commitments and stuff. But I do like to try and give back to the community because they've given me so much throughout the years I've been learning Power Platform and other bits and pieces.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I've definitely seen so much more noise around the Scottish Power Platform user group. It's so good to see. If anyone hasn't checked it out, and I think we'll get Helena to pop it in the comments and the link to it, just so you guys can see what's coming up there. As you said, it's really sort of taken off. One times a month you're trying to do in-person meetings, which I just think are very valuable to anyone. So if you're around Scotland area, go to them. But I know you do virtual ones as well, just in case people can't get up to Scotland. Is that right?
Yeah, we do. We have interest from people from all over the world who've spoken virtually. So we like to kind of keep those avenues open as well. We're trying to be a very inclusive space, and part of what I'm hoping and that we kind of want to do a bit more of is continue that inclusivity as part of the user group. So yeah, if anyone wants to speak and they're not Scotland based, then do still reach out, and I'm sure there'll be a virtual one coming up that we can get you on and speaking at.
You heard it here first, everyone. If you're watching, look out for that and definitely apply. Don't be shy is our advice. So let's get into the main topic of the podcast, which is going to be communication in the tech space. Now, we know how important it is, but let's dive into that. So where do you want to start with it, basically? And then we'll take it from there.
Where to start, I guess, is the question. It's such a broad subject, but I think it's such an important one to talk about, because I think a lot of the time, if you're a Power Platform developer, you're just kind of getting started, communication might not be an aspect of your career that you're focusing on actively, but it's such an important soft skill to have. And being technically able to deliver solutions and develop is really important. But being able to communicate aspects around that, I think, is equally as important. You know, from engaging with customers, speaking at their level, and that's probably a really good starting point, is that customer engagement, communication aspect, how that is so important when it comes to, you know, that project delivery and that technical delivery of a solution. You know, from, you know, my role as an architect, meeting with clients to gather requirements, scope out a project. You know, you're sometimes meeting with people that aren't technically minded, and if you're not able to kind of translate their speaking to your speak or vice versa, it doesn't work all that well. So you know, you have to be very adept and agile in the kind of people that you're speaking to, and kind of try and get the information you need, and be a bit of a translator from, you know, this kind of business requirement to technical requirement kind of aspect. And I guess just leaning into that a bit more as well, that, you know, those soft skills and that kind of, you know, relationship management, you know, being able to kind of understand customers' kind of behaviors and what they're looking to do, and kind of managing those expectations. It's so important in our world, and I think it's such an overlooked aspect when it comes to that, because if you have good communication with your customer, very clear and concise engagement with them, I think you're always going to have a more successful project than if you don't have, or, you know, the communication's broken, you don't keep them in the loop, that type of thing. So yeah, extremely important on that front, in my opinion, to kind of master that customer relationship side.
For sure. I mean, as you said, it's important from the get-go. I think it's good to address that working with people is never going to be easy. Emotions are involved with every person, and you, as you said, you've really got to adapt to the audience you're working with. Now, I think we know that if that communication isn't there from the get-go, sometimes the receiving people, whether it be like the end user clients, they can just nod along because they don't really understand. They nod, 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 and then it, you know, it gets into that snowball effect. That snowball's there. They have no idea what you've just said. Then as you go along, you get near the end product and they're like, well, this isn't what I wanted. This doesn't do what I wanted. And it's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, that's such a really good point to mention as well. You know, you can always cue in on this stuff when you can see these people that are just kind of nodding along, and it's, I think, as a society, we're quite reserved in that we're not very direct sometimes when we're speaking to people. We'd rather kind of skirt around the problem, or, you know, not actually just be a bit head on. I think in this game you've got to be quite direct sometimes. So if you can kind of clue in on these kind of small behavioral traits that people are kind of giving off, you know, you can kind of hone in on that a little bit and call it out. So you see that person kind of nodding along, you know, I think it's important to be like, you know, actually point out and be, you know, so and so, are you understanding of that? You know, have you got any questions? You know, and be very kind of direct in that form of communication. And I think there's been a few, you know, podcasts and user group talks that I've seen from people across the pond in America, and they're a lot more direct in their communication, I think. And and if anything we can learn from them, particularly in this space, it's, you know, being a lot more direct, and that's going to help ensure clear, concise communication end to end, I think.
Absolutely. I think sometimes people are worried to be direct because they don't want to come across as rude, but there is a difference between being direct and kind with it, as in you're trying to get the best out of the situation, and there is just being rude and direct. But yeah,
Exactly.
I think in the UK sometimes we can be a little bit too overcautious of that, and as you said, maybe we just need to adopt that approach. And when you're talking to clients, I guess it is just repetition and practice that gets you to be where you need to be in terms of skill set of communication. But were you given any sort of prompt questions? Because my question to you is, when you're talking to a client, obviously you've got open and closed questions, and how do you get the right answers out of them? Were you given prompts to open up to people, or?
So, I mean, I have done like sales training and things, and it does get you thinking slightly differently. I'm not sales minded at all, but
Right.
one thing salespeople are very good at is talking, and so that training is very good, or is very good just to kind of help think about some of the questions to ask, where to ask them in that kind of process. So, I think even if it isn't sales training, one of the things to be very kind of conscious of is, how you're speaking to someone and just thinking ahead of all of those questions you might want to ask them. And also identifying that actually, I'm not the best communicator in the world. What can I do to improve that? And you'll find a lot of the times, in companies, organizations, that they're pretty forthcoming with this stuff. If you ask them, like, I want to become a better communicator, can you help me, or can I go on some soft skills courses? That kind of thing, I think can be really valuable as well. I think for me, I'm a very big introvert. I'm not a out there type person. I keep myself to myself. So, coming on things like podcasts, doing talks, getting involved in the user group, it's such a step outside my comfort zone. And that push, I think, has helped me massively become better at my communication and understanding of these kind of concepts a little bit more. And you're right, I think that the biggest key is repetition and practice. It doesn't come overnight, but just, if you can improve little by little, iteratively, then you're going to have, a really good kind of result at the end of it, I think.
Definitely. And you can always assume that first client interaction you're ever going to have in your career, you're going to be nervous, you're going to be overthinking absolutely everything. But as you said, as long as you're constantly improving, keep being repetitive with it. And yeah, as you said, I think that's a really key point about even being a bit more forthcoming to your business and saying, it might not be a strong area of mine. Yeah, I really want to improve on it. What can I do? There is a lot of courses out there. And yeah, as you said, getting involved with stuff like this and just stepping outside of your comfort zone, maybe not for everyone in terms of early in their career, but it is a step in the right direction, and it does help from the communication front.
Absolutely. I think as well, slight sidestep from communication, but getting involved in things like podcasts like this and user group events, it's such a great way to advance your career as well, because you're getting involved with like-minded individuals who are in the same boat. You're learning from them, they're learning from you. The Power Platform community is a really good one to get involved in. And, if you're just getting started in your career and thinking, how do I get to that next level? You should definitely get involved. Even if it's not speaking, even if it's just attending to begin with, you'll soon find that the doors that networking will offer and open up will be far and beyond the ones that you get if you don't do that, in my opinion. So
definitely, it's a very non-judgmental environment as well. Everyone is super supportive, and that's been a common theme in every podcast, that everyone says the same thing. So definitely get involved from that front. But I guess there's two ways to sort of break down the communication in terms of areas. So we've sort of addressed the client side and speaking to your clients and the importance of translating technical jargon into everyday people talk. And I think we'll move on to the other side in a second. But obviously, from your point of view, what would you say is like the hardest part, or any challenges when communicating with clients? What are those things that pop to mind when you say that?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is sometimes you get that kind of conflict of opinions, and that can be a difficult one to navigate. No one likes conflict, me especially. I hate conflict, but I think sometimes, especially when you're speaking to a client, they've come to you typically because you're the subject matter expert. So they've come to you with advice. So I think sometimes we can be a little bit passive and not kind of, or forget about that point. Whereas, it's important to listen to all opinions, but I think it's also important to convey that, this is what we think is best. We can obviously work through any issues that we have, but, we're coming to you or back to you with what we think would work. So let's work with that and see how we get on. And again, if you're coming onto a call or a meeting and your body language is kind of hunched, or you don't come across as confident, you typically find the clients, customers, whoever will typically kind of treat you as such. That I think a lot of that is about confidence and how you communicate. You don't have to always be right, and I think it's important to understand when you're wrong and learn from that. But if you can do whatever you're doing in confidence, then that goes a long way in terms of being able to get the result that you want versus not. And I think a lot of people who are very focused on the technical, they forget about that because they're very good that they can do what they do, probably far better than I can, to be honest. But then they fall down on the technical side because they just can't convey their opinions in a way that is confident or matches up to what the customer kind of understands. So that's where if you can do the technical and you're really good at what you do, then investing in your soft skills is gonna take you to that next level and put you above the rest and be really helpful for your career.
For sure. And I think you touched upon two really important things there. One, being able to admit where something hasn't gone right or you've been wrong, and being able to just own it. No one is bloody perfect. We all know that, and everyone makes mistakes, but that mistake will turn into a problem if it's not addressed. So, just being confident to be able to own it and be like, yeah, I wasn't right with that decision there. So let's take a step back, reevaluate and move forwards. So I think that's really important. And then you mentioned body language as well, which I think is really overlooked. If I was sat here, arms crossed, like talking to you, you just look uninterested or whatever it may be. But I think the body language part is really important in building that trust with your clients. And obviously we all want repeat business with our clients. That's what you want. You want your partnerships and relationships with them. And I think, it's very overlooked, body language.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as you say, if you're all hunched over, arms crossed, it doesn't come across like you're open to speak or wanting to be there. Whereas if you're a little bit more kind of forward, arms not crossed, maybe arms just kind of down by your side or at your front, then it kind of gives the tone that you're more interested, you care about the customer a bit more. It's a really good kind of thing just to think about, especially if you're going into meetings and even on virtual calls, on Teams meetings and stuff, just thinking about small things like, don't eat and drink in front of the customer. I think a lot of people forget about that these days, but I was always taught don't eat your lunch while you're speaking to someone, unless it's someone you know really well. Even then, I probably wouldn't do it personally, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's just small little things can make a massive difference. And even just warming a customer up with, if you know that they like golf, just a quick, you watch the golf at the weekend, you've been playing golf recently. It just helps you get their guard down a little bit, and that then opens them up a lot more to kind of those more difficult conversations down the road.
100%. And you want them to feel as though you're approachable and they can talk to you about things, because once you open that can of worms and they get talking, you discover more about what they actually want with their tech, etc. So obviously, from a different angle now, we talked about the client side and having that communication within clients, but you work within a Microsoft partner. Let's talk about the communication and the importance of that communication with the internal team, because that can play such a big factor to the success of projects.
100%, yeah. And it's again an area that I feel isn't talked about enough, and that kind of team communication and how to manage that. I think sometimes working within a technical team, that communication aspect could be even more important than that communication aspect with a client. Because if you've gone, we take a look at a project, we've gathered requirements, we've now got to take that back to the team. As a solution architect, my role is to come up with that solution, figure out what's working best, or what's going to be best for the customer, and come up with that kind of vision. So then working with technical teams to execute that vision in the way that I think's best, it can be challenging sometimes, and making sure that it's done in a way that I feel like does the solution justice for the customer can be quite difficult sometimes. I mean, I'm a very kind of big perfectionist in my professional life. And I think, when I'm kind of come up with a solution and executing that, nothing but perfection is kind of good enough for me. So I almost expect that from other teams as well. So it can be hard sometimes to kind of navigate those waters. And again, I think just having a bit of kind of being a bit humble sometimes, if someone comes up with an idea, being kind of able to admit that you're wrong, and also challenging opinions as well. I think it's important that, everyone challenges each other's opinions to make sure that we're getting the best for the customer at the end of the day. So, I think in this role, you have to be able to admit when you're wrong. We spoke about that, but, it's a real kind of big part of the role is, okay, do you know what? No, we can do it better that way. That's such a better way to do it. I didn't realize that even existed. Like, let's have a look at that and see what the outcome is. As long as it still aligns with what the client's wanting, then it's absolutely fine. But you need to be kind of able to eat humble pie a little bit in this role, I think.
I honestly appreciate you coming on, Josh. I have no idea what's happening. My computer's going crazy, but honestly, I think it's such an important topic to discuss. So I really do appreciate you coming on and talking about it. As I've mentioned, we'll definitely pop all the links into the Scottish Power Platform user group and go from there, and keep an eye out for everything going on. But if anyone has any questions, drop them in the comments and we'll get to them. But if not, Josh, I'm so sorry if I can't hear you or you can't hear me. I'll talk to you after this if it works. But thank you so much for joining, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.